Hey guys, this is the Palmetto State Armory PSAK 104 American Bastard. This was originally set up with a full complement of Midwest Industries Alpha AK furniture. Did some testing on that, did a review on that. Go ahead and check out that video if you want to know more. Short version was I found that there were too many shortcomings with that Midwest furniture, so I replaced it after that review with a full set of Texas Weapon Systems furniture. So this now has the TWS short handguard and the TWS dogleg dust cover rail. And this is the setup, more or less, that I took to the Moons Out 2025 match in West Virginia. And if you've seen that video, you know that I had some issues with this handguard. Ironically, I haven't had any issues with the dust cover, and I feel like I'm having the opposite experience of a lot of people who have tried out this furniture. So we're going to be talking about the TWS AK ecosystem, talking about ways that it's better, maybe ways that it's worse than the Midwest Industries. And after that, we're going to move on to another piece of hardware. Also, at the end of this video, I'll give you a round count update on the PSAK 104. I guess we're just going to keep doing that as we keep putting new furniture on it, testing it out, and taking it to higher round counts. Let's get into it. Today's video was made possible by our channel sponsor, Venture Surplus. Venture recently became a dealer for Sophie, who you might know for making exercise and base layers like the famous Silkies, as well as just, general undershirts. These garments look very comfortable and very functional for exercise. Unfortunately, they are a little bit immodest. Last time I went diving with Brass Facts, I tried to wear pants. He wouldn't let me. So, you're not going to see me wearing Ranger panties anytime soon. But if you've got the goods and you want to show them off, check out the link to Venture Surplus in the video description and use the code provided to save 10% off your order. A big thank you to Venture for sponsoring this channel. Thank you guys for watching. Let's get back to the show. Alright, this is the Texanized AK 104. We're using both the handguard and the dogleg dust cover rail. These things don't have to go together, but they do work pretty well together, and Texas Weapon Systems advertises them as being coplanar. So the height over bore is the same on the optics rail as well as the accessory rail. That was not the case for the Midwest Alpha series. That stuff sits a whole lot lower on the handguard because it's very similar to Zenit Co. That has a couple of weird side effects. One is that the Picatinny rail on the top is interrupted and is missing a bunch of actual usable rail space. Already kind of a problem on its own. Also, the rail geometry on the Midwest Alpha handguard is not really proper 1913 mil-spec rail, so there's a lot of accessories that just don't fit on it even though they totally should. That's because the Midwest Alpha furniture has to work with the stock AK gas tube. TWS gets around that by just making a taller, wider handguard, which means that they can have a full length of proper geometry, uninterrupted Picatinny rail. The downside, if you can call it that, is that they have to use their own replacement gas tube. Not really a big deal in my opinion. Installing this furniture and switching to the TWS gas tube did not cause any reliability issues in this gun. The coplanar accessory and optics rails could be a good or a bad thing. One thing that was kind of nice about the Midwest AK setup was that when I did finally find a laser and light setup, I was using a full height laser box and I did not have to use a super tall optic to clear it because the optic rail sat higher than the accessory rail. Not the case with the TWS parts. If you're going to put a full-size laser module on the front of this gun, you're going to need a regular AR style absolute or lower 1/3 height optic in order to clear it. Then you get into that escalating height over bore problem that we really hate with AKs. This handguard requires more modification to the gun than the Midwest one does. It requires the removal of the sling loop on the lower handguard retaining cap, and also you have to replace your factory gas tube with the one that comes with this kit. You don't have to fully remove the handguard retaining cap to install this handguard. However, the handguard retaining cap just sort of free floats in there. It is no longer part of the handguard lockup once you install this system. Like a lot of different AK handguards, the TWS fastens into the trunnion here, and it also has a barrel clamp. And both of those are critical to keep this thing solid. Unlike the Midwest Industries furniture and a lot of other AK rails, this is not interference fit, meaning that you're not just sort of hammering it into place and just force fitting the softer metal of the handguard into the harder metal of the trunnion. I got this thing set up initially, torqued it down nice and tight, used Vibratight on the fasteners, and then I put a couple hundred rounds through it to make sure that everything was working and nothing was falling apart, and then I took it to the Moons Out 2025 night vision match. And the handguard loosened up and started rotating back and forth within the first 5 rounds of the first stage. Both of the clamping systems loosened up on me in under 300 rounds. So not only was the handguard sliding forwards, but also the barrel clamp was loose and the handguard was rotating from side to side. After I got back from Moons Out, I reinstalled the handguard using a lot more torque and a lot more vibratite, cranking down on the fasteners until the metal was crying out in protest. Now, you may say, hey, that doesn't really sound like torque spec. And you're right, it doesn't. These don't have torque spec. A lot of these AK handguards will often have instructions that say, hey, don't over torque this, but they don't give you torque spec, so who even knows? All I can really tell you is that I tightened it a lot. Well beyond what I think would be a safe torque spec, but not enough to actually strip anything out. All the fasteners are still tight. The problem is, this thing just doesn't stay tight in the trunnion. After getting this thing reinstalled and tightened, I put a couple more mags through it, and once again, it loosened up. You can see there's a little gap here that shouldn't be here. This thing started sliding forwards until it contacted the handguard retaining cap, and then it stopped. So yes, that was a loss of 0 for my laser module. However, I think it's actually in a pretty secure position now. I could just re-zero my laser and keep using it, and I think it would probably stay in this position. We're getting a lot more contact here than we probably want. Obviously, the system is not designed to involve this handguard retaining cap in any way, but hey, just a tertiary lockup point for us at this point. I think I probably will move on to a different handguard setup because I think I've given this one the old college try. So what's the issue? Is it compatibility with this gun? Is it compatibility with this specific serial number? Or is it an issue with the handguard itself? I think it's probably all three. The AK platform heats up extremely fast. A lot of that heat dumps immediately into the trunnion, so trying to fasten something into that trunnion using screws and Loctite is just not really going to sustain a lot of heat. The nice thing about having to hammer the handguard on to the gun is that you have to hammer the handguard back off of the gun, otherwise it's not going to move. Now, it probably will work on a lot of AKs, maybe most AKs, but it's really hard to guarantee what those AKs are going to be. For example, this is obviously meant to be used with AKM-style rifles. There is a slight geometry difference in the 100 series. They've got this little cutout here for the folding stock latch. In order to install this handguard, you do have to remove that, otherwise you got a little spring in the way. Does that change the way this handguard locks up into the trunnion? There's a wedge block system in there. There's a couple of blocks that when you tighten the screws, they pull themselves together and put pressure on the top and bottom of the trunnion hole, trunnion pocket, the trussie, whatever you want to call it. So that should accommodate for a lot of different tolerances between, different receivers from different companies or different patterns of rifle, or even just serial number to serial number. Ultimately, what I'll say is that an interference fit handguard system like the Midwest Alpha furniture will work with any AK, although you may have to do some fitting in order to get it to work. This does not require fitting, it just may not work. And that's a shame because I really like this handguard. It's a little bit taller than the Midwest Alpha and some other handguards, but you have a full length of Picatinny on the top and the bottom, all of which is very usable. And then you have M-LOK slots on the sides, all of which are usable except for the ones that are right here near the handguard retaining cap. But because the handguard retaining cap is really just ornamental with this handguard, there's no reason you couldn't cut it off completely and just have that space open. That's a more permanent change to the gun, but this is a PSAK 104 American Bastard. It is not a collectible firearm. It has not actually seen any sort of real-world excitement. Regardless of what my next furniture choice is for this PSAK, I'm probably removing that handguard retaining cap. So that's my review of the TWS handguard. I really liked using it. It was very easy to get a usable setup on this thing, plenty of rail estate, and surprisingly good protection from heat because it keeps your hand away from any of the stuff you don't want to touch. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with this specific gun, and I can't guarantee if it'll work with yours either. It's still a lot cheaper than something like a SureShot chassis. It's comparable in price to the Midwest Alpha stuff when it goes on sale. All right, let's move on to the optics rail.
Oh.
Yeah, that's supposed to just be loose in there. Such is life.
Such is life, yeah. But it's strange because I have different experience with the Texas weapon systems. Like once you mount it, it's super solid. But I guess it just the difference. The problem with AKs is they're made very differently with very variable tolerances. So yeah. But it is nice. Except the trigger and the handguard and
the optic and the laser,
the other issues.
Suppressor, and yeah.
This MRO is not that bad.
The TWS dogleg optics rail is a replacement for both the dust cover and the rear sight. The hinge mechanism actually replaces the rear sight on the AK, and then this more built-up railed dust cover replaces the stamped steel factory one. I've talked before about how the AK community has a really hard time with consensus building. Every time AK subjects come up on this channel, I'll get a bunch of people saying, don't use TWS doglegs, they don't hold zero, and then I'll get a bunch of other people saying, hey man, you gotta try the TWS dogleg, it's the best thing I ever used, and it holds zero. So, once again, I'm finding out for myself. The TWS dogleg accessory rail obviously replaces your rear sight, and that's why they have their own little peep sight that attaches on the back here if you still want to have the ability to use some sort of rudimentary backup. This thing replaces the dust cover itself with an aluminum part, not steel. We're coming back to that. And also you have to replace the return spring guide rod because this one has special geometry on the takedown button. So the thing that's supposed to make the TWS dogleg rail hold zero is that it controls the position of the dust cover in 3 dimensions. So you see this little bent tab in here. When the dust cover is closed, this is pushing in on the receiver and controlling the horizontal position of the dust cover, ensuring that it's always pushed as far this way as possible. Then this modified takedown button, you can see it's got a little bit of a slope at the rear, so when the dust cover is closed, that button is pushing the dust cover backwards and down. So in theory, every time you close the dust cover and then rack the action a couple times to get it to settle, the dust cover is always being pushed as far possible in this direction, and this direction, meaning that it's basically going to be bottoming out onto the corner of the gun back here. There's a little bit of a lip on the trunnion here that controls how far back the dust cover can move. So it is being pushed back into that little lip, it's being pushed down into the receiver, and it's being pushed this way against this side of the receiver. Does it work? Depends on who you ask. In my experience, it has held zero just fine for a red dot zeroed at 50 yards. I can't detect a shift in zero at 50 yards, but this is not an extremely accurate gun to begin with, so I don't know. The groups are pretty much just lost. Hey, bro. Come on, man. The groups are not really small enough for me to be able to tell. If I put some magnification on this thing and shot some really careful groups with some good ammo, I'm sure I'd be able to detect a small difference. But also, you really don't have to open the dust cover all that much if you don't wanna. I know, what if you need to clean it? Well, I thought the whole point of the AK was that you don't need to clean it that much. So I don't really consider that to be an issue. This gun was always set up for very short-range shooting only. It's a short-range cartridge. I'm totally okay with the dust cover. But I do wonder if it will actually hold up over time, because you see, we have got this little metal button back here, and this has to be pushing down and back on the dust cover in the same way every single time. The dust cover is made out of aluminum, I'm pretty sure. This button may be steel or maybe aluminum. Either way, we got metal on metal wear, so these surfaces will probably change over time if you insist on fiddle fucking with this thing all of the time. So my review of the dogleg dust cover, thumbs up. This thing does angle slightly down because the way that it sits on the gun, so you're going to put your low-mounted red dot on there and find that you've got to dial out almost the entire elevation in order to get it on target. It's just AK shit, man. Deal with it. From a general design and usability standpoint, I think this handguard and this optics rail both work extremely well. I found it very easy to set up the gun in the way that I like it using this furniture. The only issue that I have is that the handguard will not stay attached to this gun, and that I'm a little bit worried about long-term durability with that dust cover return to zero mechanism. If you want to set up an AK with all the modern enablers, this does seem to be an effective way to do it. This stuff is also relatively affordable as far as, complete sets of AK replacement accessories and furniture goes. We also don't add a shitload of extra weight to the AK. That's one of the common AK problems. In order to add weight, you first have to add weight. Not so much with this, because all of these parts are replacing other parts. I'm not going to say this is the most sensible way to set up an AK. We'll talk about sensible AK setups some other time. But if you really insist on fully modernizing an AK, this does seem like a pretty good way to do it. Assuming you can get that handguard to stay on, or assuming you're okay with the handguard sort of not staying on, but then getting pinched in place by that handguard retaining cap. So all in all, I think the Texas Weapon Systems parts are pretty good. I can see why people like them. Bit of a dice roll on handguard fitment to your specific gun. In any case, let's talk about how I got this gun completely set up using this furniture. All right, let's go over the way I have this thing set up. It's very similar to the way it was configured at Moons Out 2025, with a couple of changes based on lessons learned from that match. So, I took this general idea from Brass Facts Night Vision AK setup. We really want to keep everything as low as possible because the AK already has a bit of a height over bore problem, and as we continue to escalate it, the gun gets less comfortable, more difficult to shoot, or you have to keep adding more bolt-on stuff to get your head out of the way. So everything on this is set up to be as low as possible. I had a super low MRO HD mounted on the gun during the Moons Out match. That was slightly too low, and then it turned out that anytime I had to use one of my tape switches, I would get my thumb pretty much completely in the way of my optic, making it difficult to passive aim. Or, you know, if you just adopt a nice rigid C-clamp for normal shooting, same problem, thumb is in the way. So what's on there right now is a Holosun Ames in a low mount, and the Holosun Ames low mount raises it a little bit up. So instead of being, you know, whatever it is, I want to say a 0.9 centerline height for most micro dots in a low mount, the Ames mount is 1.1 or 1.2 inches. So just a little bit taller, gives it enough room to clear not just the laser module and the tape switch, but also my thumb if it happens to be on there. So good optic setup, no complaints about that at all. The laser I have on here is the 3 Electrons DIR-1V. They've got several versions of their laser. I've used most of them, and at Moons Out I had the DIR-V. Now it's got the DIR-1V. The difference is that this is a little bit smaller, quite a lot cheaper, and it does not have a co-witnessed or a slaved visible laser to the IR laser. This is an infrared only unit, and that's fine. Another thing is this does not have an on-off switch. One concern that I have about the DIR-V is that the build quality does not inspire a lot of confidence. That switch feels really loose, and the more times you actuate it, the more times I'm worried that I'm going to just break it off. So this is an always on unit or always hot unit, and then it's got the fire button, and that's it. Extremely simple. Have not actually had any issues with parasitic drain on this yet, which is very rare. Every other laser that I've ever tried that is always on or always ready to be used, rather, always in standby, has parasitic drain. The new Holosun Iris, for example, it always has sort of a keep alive feature because it can be switched into Viz override even when it's powered off, meaning it's not powered off. That one seems to have pretty bad parasitic drain in my experience. This one is actually doing just fine. Still on the original battery after using it and letting it sit for a long time. So pleasantly surprised. I like the fact that this is substantially cheaper than a DIR-V. The only thing I'm losing is that slaved visible laser, which is really only usable for zero conformation, and there's no real reason that you can't just, you know, confirm it by looking through the optic with your nods on. Maybe it's more convenient to be able to do that during the daytime, but I don't really care. Also, it is a little shorter, so I think I'm able to push it up a little bit further, which means I can move my tape switch from my white light up a little bit further, and it's in a more comfortable ergonomic place. The white light that I'm using is really secondary. This thing is mainly set up for night vision and set up exclusively for very close range use, so I don't really need a huge amount of output. So I've got a very small, very cheap Streamlight TLR RM1 on there. These are their long gun optimized pistol lights, I guess is a way to think of them. Very similar to like the Inforce WML. Has an activation button on the body itself, so you can just press that. I always like having that as a backup option, but these can also accept the Streamlight proprietary tape switch. So that's what it's hooked up with here, and then the pad is just sitting behind the DIR-1V. Another thing that I like about these is that the heads can be twisted to disable them. It's nice to be able to do that for storage, or if you're, you know, going into a nighttime situation and you know for sure that you do not want to accidentally activate the light. As for the suppressor, this is the Wolfpack Armory Disruptor 30. This is the suppressor that I was using at Moons Out. However, I had it on one of their Plan B compatible mounts, and then I had their 1/2x28 Night Howler muzzle device on here. Remember that the American Bastard has 1/2x28 threading instead of the more common metric 14x1 left hand or whatever it is. Just makes it more convenient to source muzzle devices. Now this has a direct thread mount. It's very, very cheap one. I think it's from Caw Valley Precision, KVP. So just a 1/2x28 direct thread mount. Shortens, lightens the package a little bit, and I would have no reason to ever want to shoot this thing unsuppressed. Maybe it would be nice to be able to take the can off and get it a little bit shorter for transport, especially considering that our brace mechanism no longer folds. We basically got a folder delete back here. So yeah, this gun is very long. It does not fit into cases that are about the right size for a 14.5 AR anymore. So, whatever. It's good enough. This gun is so under gas natively that just direct threading a suppressor on there and doing no gas tuning whatsoever, like no KNS piston like I have in my AKG F5, yeah, this is actually pretty damn pleasant to shoot full-time suppressed. Because the sling loop has been dremeled off of the handguard retainer and then covered up by this handguard, we just got a little M-LOK sling QD cup right there. And then to improve grip and give a place for indexing, there's a BCM CAG, kinesthetic angled grip, the 1913 version. Puts this in a really nice position for me, that when I comfortably, naturally grip the gun, my thumb falls onto the white light pad, which is the way that I want it, and then I can consciously modify my grip for when I'm shooting under nods. For all of the Moons Out match, and ever since I got back, I've been exclusively using these Bulgarian magazines. These are metal-lined plastic magazines. They take a little bit of breaking in before they want to go into the mag well without getting all stuck in there, but they haven't given me any issues so far. I'm just going to keep using these in this gun, and I'll keep using Magpul ones in my Magpulified GF5. Just, you know, so I can get some data on both, I guess. Pistol grip is the B5 Systems AK grip. This one is very, very comfortable. I like this a lot. It really is, I think, an equal to the Magpul K grip for the AKs, and they have little rubber storage plugs in there, so there's a handful of batteries or whatever the hell in there. Maybe a thing of lube. I'm not going to pull it off right now. Also, since returning from Moons Out 2025, I replaced the PSA Builder's Kit trigger with a ALG AKT. I don't think it's the nicest version of the ALG AK trigger. It's the slightly cheaper version, but it's an improvement in, you know, crispness and pull. And also, I have not had any of the trigger reset issues with this trigger, even after lots of hand polishing and fitting and all that, and lots of trying to, you know, break it in through dry fire and live fire. That AK Builder's Kit trigger from PSA just wouldn't work. Last tiny thing to mention, I do have the rear peep sight from TWS on the back of this thing. It's completely unusable unless you remove all of the accessories from the top of the rail, otherwise they get in the way. But it looks cool, and this way I don't lose it somewhere on my desk. All right, that's the setup. Let's go back to the studio for our conclusion. Well, before we finish this thing off, I did go ahead and swap the TWS handguard over to my PSAK GF5, which is a proper AKM pattern gun, not a 100 series gun like the 104 American Bastard. After a couple hundred rounds, including some mag dumps, this thing has not loosened up and moved. Ignore this little gap here. That was there after installing. I simply couldn't get this handguard any deeper onto this trunnion, onto this gun. Again, it bears repeating, every AK is a beautiful snowflake. This one has the handguard retaining cap completely removed in order to use a Magpul Zhukov forend, which is what was on there previously. I also removed it from the 104 American Bastard and swapped the Zhukov over to there for a little bit more shooting before we settle on our next furniture choice for this gun. So why does this handguard work on the GF5 when it didn't work on the 104 American Bastard? Maybe it's just luck of the draw. Maybe it just happened to install with the proper amount of Vibratite and torque this time. Not too much, not too little. We Goldilocks it. Hooray, mission accomplished. Maybe it's some difference in the geometry of the trunnion between the AKM pattern and the 104. Maybe it's some difference between serial numbers. This one was made in a certain way on a certain machine, and this one was not. My personal belief is that it has to do with heat. Vibratite, at least the kind that you normally use that's included with handguards like Midwest and stuff, or Loctite, whether it's blue or red, does not resist heat all that well. When you shoot AKs, they heat up really, really fast. But this gun is not suppressed, so maybe it doesn't heat up fast enough or heat up enough to actually cause the thread locker to break loose on those fasteners. If we really wanted this thing to be installed semi-permanently, I guess we could use Rockset. Rockset is virtually impervious to heat, has to be busted loose with moisture. I don't know, man. Watch the comments. You're going to see opinions split 50-50 regardless because it's AK shit. As for how the PSAK 104 American Bastard is holding up, I did mention that we had to replace the kit build trigger with the ALG AKT. A couple hundred rounds later, all exclusively suppressed, and I'm not actually seeing that much deformation of the bolt tail. Right now, I think we're a bit over 3,000 and everything on this gun is still working just fine, but you'd expect that. 3,000 rounds is not a lot of rounds, although it's also an insane number of rounds. Thousands of more rounds than anybody is going to actually shoot through their guns. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned. We're going to keep shooting this gun once it's got a new set of furniture on it. Who knows what that'll be? Actually, I do. It's your shot. Alright, if you'd like to support the channel, please check out the links in the video description. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I will see you next time.